Hey everyone, KS here. I am decided to create the second part of this video for the undervolting and overclocking for the i9-13900KS and the K. For those of you guys who followed my last video, it is basically the continuous part of this. Only difference is that instead of using the Intel extreme tuning utility, this time I'm planning to set this up in the BIOS so you guys have an idea about how to do it from there using the Asus motherboard. For those of you guys who haven't followed my last video, I will leave a link on the description below to my last video, unless you're somebody who has that experience and you just want to like a little refresher or maybe some ideas, inspiration in that case. Now, I do want to say that I created this video for entertainment purposes. I do not recommend for everybody to copy the settings I have. Please only make sure that you are researching and understanding a little bit more about the different strategies, including the current strategy that I'm using, which is TVB, which stands for the Terminal Velocity Boost. Since I'm going to be using this strategy, I'm going to be using this on this video. I will also leave a link in the description below for more information. This is from SkatterBencher, who has information and great information about the terminal velocity boost, so you guys understand exactly how the process works. I'm only going to be covering exactly the settings here. On my last video, I did cover slightly a little bit about using the Intel Extreme tuning utility. And I do recommend using this while bench testing it, and stress testing in real life support. This way, if something happens, you can go back to the last settings and still go into the BIOS, restarting and all that, and especially if something goes wrong in this case. You can use the Intel Extreme Tuning, which can be extremely helpful because you can definitely go if something goes on, especially with like conjunction with SkatterBencher. I love you guys probably seen videos from J2 Sense, Gary Tech, and other videos who have used the Intel Extreme tuning utility with conjunction with SkatterBencher, and of course, which is a great tool because it tells you exactly like if the apps crashes or anything, you can at least go back to register if you're overclocking. Same goes with undervolting as well. So on my last video, I covered a little bit about undervolting the i9KS and the K as well. I came with good results after doing some testing, and I found that I was able to normally undervolt at least slightly lower to about negative 0.008. In this case, with my current this video, I decided to do with negative 0.007. In this case, this is, of course, I'm planning to make adjustments, but I just want to make sure there was no instability. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys basically how to put numbers from the Intel Extreme Tuning into the BIOS. For those of you guys using different motherboards, I highly suggest researching by using Google or the forums to find out what the names are, because not everything is going to be the same under the same name on the same place. This is I'm using the Asus 790 Apex with in this case for the i9KS. Of course, with the K is going to be covered because it's pretty much about similar in this case. The only difference is that KS is a binded, so it tends to run higher frequencies with lower temperature in many cases, unless you're one of those with a silicon lottery CPU. So to start with is I went ahead and went to the extreme trigger in the Asus motherboard. I make sure that, of course, XMP is turned on. I use XMP2 for my own density here. For Asus, I went ahead and switched to Asus multi-core enhancement and enabled the remove all limits. This is to make sure that I am running to the sufficient power, and making sure that if I use any like limited removal on the settings, like enforce all limits, that may cause some terminal tunneling on my CPU, maybe just some crash, maybe because it's not running sufficient power to cover what's supposed to be in this case. In this case also, next here is, of course, I also make sure to change and update my DRAM frequency to what I want. In this case, my terminal take went by default to 6,000 megahertz. So I was able to overclock it without any issues to 6400 megahertz, at least by XMP2. May do manual overclocking there in the future. For this also, I decided to performance core ratio, change it to by core usage. I went ahead and first core 1, 2, all the way to 5. I went to 6000 megahertz, was 6 and 7, 5900 megahertz, and core 8 to 56, just because core 7 tend to be really hot for me in this case. Some people normally experiences the first core being hotter than the last ones, but for my case, it ends up being the last one here. Then I went to specific performance core. And of course, I went to preferred core specific ratio limit, says to 60. I went to staging to adaptive mode. For those of you guys who follow to the inter extreme tune utility, you'll find out that it's actually set to adaptive mode by when you guys check by core, which is below there. So make sure you guys look to the settings to give you guys idea. In this case, it's adaptive mode. I set it to obviously negative because we're offsetting, we're undervolting now, overvolting. So, for my case, I decided to do auto. I found out that on my previous settings, with the full settings that I tried copying directly from Intel Extreme, normally by default it does give you a little information what the default voltage is, but for some reason it actually didn't work well. So I decided to leave an auto. And of course, I did adjust the performance core offset to 0.075 in this case. Normally I may adjust it to 8500, but I will just leave it there for now until my next restart, because normally if I set my computer by hibernation, so it looks like it's not fully updated when it's, when you start it this way. So it's better to do a full restart to make sure everything is updated and all and synchronized. So next is performance core 1 specific ratio to 6000 adapter with same auto and 0.075. Make sure it's negative because we're undervolting. Performance core 2 6000 adaptive mode, same with the offset. Same goes with performance core 3, and I set auto again to performance core 4 6000 adaptive mode, auto 0.075. Performance core 5 6000 adaptive mode, auto 0.75 as well. Performance core 6 6000, same settings as previously. Performance core 7 6000 as well. This is just to make sure that I'm able to synchronize with the terminal velocity and all that. So it normally does get on the last course, it does get to the one set by 59 and 56. It is able to actually get to 6000 thanks to the whole terminal velocity boost strategy going on here. So for efficient core, I went to sync all cores, set it up to 4300 megahertz here. Specific efficient cores, I set it to 43 for first group 0, adaptive mode, auto to 0.75 also. Efficient core group 1 43, and same goes with the number. For group 2, I set up by 32. I left it like that because that was exactly how it was default previously. I found out that when I tried to overclock it, it caused some stability on my end. Group 3, I did set up to 43. Also, it's pretty much about close to how it was by default here. Looks like I can change this, so I'll just go ahead and put this here. It looks like the last previous settings was set to that, so I'm actually just gonna go ahead and set it up this way better, because it looks like the other settings had the 0.8 here. So I just 0.8, and again I did benchmark and everything. Everything actually passed. So I'm setting this, I'm changing this, the offset to from 0.75 to 0.8 in this case, because I found that could to do it even when I did it with the intercore extreme tuning here. So yeah, so going back here, making sure that I didn't miss anything. Sometimes we'll miss here, and it can be a pain here. For AVX related controls, I went here, set the user specify on the ratio offset to per core ratio limit, and change the AVX2 ratio offset to 6. Digit VRM, I changed from CPU low line calibration to level 6. Normally by default makes these level 2, level 3. Next is the thermal velocity boost. This is the option that you want to enable that, and that is where the strategy goes to. So for TVB voltage limitation, I disabled that, and haste TVB disabled that. The reason why is because I found out the Intel extreme tuning normally may automatically adjust it previously on restart, and I found that this had to do with the BIOS. And so normally the temperature for B actually sometimes changing from, like, on my first temperature A, let's just say for core A, it was 68 degrees, and temperature B was 74 degrees, or even sometimes 68, which is almost about the same, which that kind of make no sense really in that case. Overclocking TBB, enable them, which basically you get this group for cores 1 to 8. You want to enable that. I set temperature A to 68 degrees. Negative ratio offset A to user specify, set it to 1. Normally set 1, negative 1 automatically is 1. Temperature B to 100 degrees. You can set up to 115 degrees for specifically for the KS, which normally you can still run to up to 115 degrees without having much problem in this case. Even 100 degrees will be fine for the KS being a hot chip. I heard for the regular K you can run up to 100 and still be okay, especially if you're sending a bench or stress testing in this case. But my strategy is to try getting this lower than 100%, 100 degrees in this case, which is what I accomplished in this case. My previous first video when I bought my computer, I was able to get it to 6300 megahertz, but then my temperatures were pretty much about 99 to almost 100 degrees and all that, 94. But with the new strategy, I was able to actually get it down below 91 degrees, which is actually good with, you know, a good amount of wattage using, especially when not under load. Normally I did notice that amount of wattage, like watts spent on you know, stress testing and SkatterBencher with the new and old version, it wasn't hugely different, just because with the updated one, I think SkatterBencher, they actually take about 236 or 302 watts, while on the old strategy they take about 242. But sometimes, a lot of times, yeah, I end up actually getting to over 325 watts, which with the new strategy and offset, it's definitely a huge change, guys. Almost like, you know, sometimes over 100 degrees, or, you know, or 50 degrees or so. It's definitely a huge difference. Anyways, negative ratio offset B, ratio offset to 0. This is for the temperature B side. This is because I disabled that part for the P core 1 and P core 2. So on P 2 active with 68 degrees, user specified to 1 and 100 degrees also. For negative ratio offset is to specify and 0 as well. For 3 core, enable 70 degrees, user specify to 1 ratio, temperature B 90 degrees, negative ratio offset B to user specify, ratio offset 1, core enable 70 degrees, user specify to 1 and 90 degrees, negative ratio offset user specify 1, core 5, 70 degrees, user specify to 1, 90 degrees temperature B with ratio offset 1. 6 core is 60 degrees with offset 1, 90 degrees temperature B, ratio offset 1 for B side, and 7 core 75 degrees to ratio offset to 85 degrees temperature B with ratio offset 1. 8 core 75 degrees you specify with ratio offset to 2, also temperature B 85 degrees here, and so ratio offset 1. This two normally I leave it by default and not touch it in this case. The next one is I set the global core SIV voltage to adapt the mode. This is the section here where you undervolt. So anybody wondering about where the undervolt is, it's going to be the offset voltage. For additional turbo mode CPU core voltage, you can set up any number there, but I decided to leave it auto. For this case, it's set here to 0.75. I'm gonna just go ahead and set up to 0.08, and then just lastly, enable the high DRAM voltage both. It's also have with RAM and all, so I set this to both to 1.45 and 1.45 for the VDQ voltage as well. So yeah, this is pretty much it when it comes to that. There's, again, you guys can change and update this to your liking based on your configuration and strategy. Mine's work here. Another good settings to make sure keep an eye is PCIe configuration and PCI Express configuration. If anybody here has a riser cable that you're attaching your CPU, GPU, make sure that you guys do check this option and make sure that you change from auto to the generation you're using. In my case, I use an RTX 4090 with the Thermaltake racer cable that runs PCI 4.0. In this case, I will change it to generation 4, and that's what I did because some people they reported traveling and they experienced some glitches and floating is going on, and I found that it was auto mode, and that kind of actually resolved that. So after you finish, you're gonna go ahead and see changes. You'll notice that the difference that happened between this and then press OK, and normally that will reset here. There's a chance that, of course, because I was in every nation, it may not fully update. It may show in the Intel Extreme Tuning app, but there's a chance it may not synchronize well. But anyways, that's completely fine because my last configuration they have that, and that was still stable in this case, which is completely okay because that, thanks to the undervolting, that actually reduces amount of voltage here going on here. So in here is basically what I had previously. In here, that was my last test. This was actually the first thing I did, and that was with OCCT. OCCT basically gave me pretty much some of the numbers here. This was my previous numbers here for anybody wondering. So basically, the highest I was able to get, at least for VID 1.34A4, the max I was getting to package mode is 91 degrees, which you guys can see is definitely a good change. And that with the hottest one was pretty much about P Core 7. As I say, it's pretty hot core there. With E-cores pretty much remain the same because it's been actually doing well in this case with with how it goes here. For watts, it was usually about 213.15 watts with OCCT. Normally the 213 only was there for just a little bit, and then it was running between 198 to 203 watts in this case, which is pretty good. They actually throttle between 6,000 megahertz from most of the cores here, but then after running stresses for a couple minutes, it then went down to all the way to 5,400 megahertz, between 5399 to 54 megahertz. In 1 or 2 run about 56, which is, it's definitely not a huge deal for me in this case. So yeah, and all the cores just running about 43 megahertz in this case. So you guys give you an idea with that this actually passed without any kind of errors, which in my previous one I did have some errors, and I found that a couple of them were due to the undervolting part, but that was because I did make some changes like disabling some of the E-cores, but it didn't work the best out in this case. SkatterBencher also passed. I found that with SkatterBencher, that was actually the one that gave me the highest actually voltage, and also so that was let me see, guys. Yeah, so that SkatterBencher was actually the one that gave me about the most watts span. It spent about almost 236 watts. Of course, getting also to temperature around 90 degrees, 91 degrees actually Celsius. So that was the most actually got it compared to OCCT got me to pretty much to what you guys saw on here, pretty much here, and that was 91 degrees. With SkatterBencher, they actually reach about 90 degrees, I will say, almost about the same. But yeah, it did spend a little bit more wattage, more electricity than actually did with OCCT and SkatterBencher were pretty much about the same, but just SkatterBencher did spend a little bit more wattage in this case, which, it's not a big deal because it's still, many people complains that even for the K, they're spending over 250 watts, some even almost 400, which is a lot. And I mean, think about it, you guys know that the KS is a really hot chip, so it's also great to know that I was able to get it down to at least still below 250 for stress and Cinebench. And we're talking about this, right? Cinebench, benchmarking and bench testing and stress test, which normally by games and all that, it probably just be way less than that. So, maybe I'll be getting less than 200, watts in this case. Who knows? We'll have to do some more tests with this. Um, and lastly, there was 3D Mark, which in this case, um, I was able to get this to about pretty much about 212 watts, and it was still, it did good. It did actually this amount with actually under 90 degrees. So 3D Mark and all that did really well, especially with temperature wise. I was very impressed that I was able to not even get to 90 degrees with even the hottest chip core, which is core 7, which about 94 degrees. Fifth core is also to be like a little bit high, but he actually did a really good job on that. So a summary here, it's as you guys remembering from the BIOS, this is exactly this. I did compare, take some pictures exactly, and it show exactly. So when you guys are checking a couple places, make sure you check what the temperature for TV is. Make sure the ratio core. Make sure you check the performance per core tuning. Check H to see what your configuration is. See, as I set in mine to default, it was default in here as well. And I tried to put it by default voltage, but it didn't work previously. So I set it up by default, and it's exactly how it's set up in there. So, yeah, I just did a refresh, and it did update to the 0.080 degrees here. So it actually did update it. But anyway, I may just run another test to see. But yeah, so far it looks pretty much about my previous settings. So I may estimate that I may use slightly a little bit less wattage with the Undervolt going on. And I'm just planning to leave it to about 6,000. I wanted to get back to 62, 63, but I think it's not really worth because I didn't see much of a huge difference, especially with FPS and all that. In the contrary, previous version I was only able to overclock to 62 for about 2 cores. I believe so. Yeah, so about 2-3 cores. While on this one, unable to overclock to 6,000 on 5 cores. With 6 and 7, leave 59. I know in the old configuration, that old configuration it was 59 on 3, I believe. But on this one, I was able to get 5. Of course, I had to reduce the 7 cores to 56, but again, that's completely fine. So it still did a great job. I am very satisfied personally with how the temperature is. I mean, I'm sure many of you guys can agree for those who has the KS and K. My previously by stock, I was getting about almost 325 watts, even when, of course, by bench testing and all that, but even by when it was not even under load, I was still spending about almost sometimes to 263 watts just by nothing, which right here, you guys can see, if I just clear minimum mix here, and you guys can see the minimum running, it's less than 100 watts, even being underwater, while the old configuration it was almost 170, but many times it went to 211, 210, even on when gaming was 260 to sometimes 300 watts. Especially, and like I say, on now on the low, like under these conditions, it sometimes even went to about 200 watts. In this case here, you guys can see the difference. Even when now on the low, it's less than 100 watts, and it was definitely great. So see here, when loads, when temperature is definitely good, it does intends to go to 6,000 megahertz and all peak cores. And temperatures, you guys can see it's pretty much running good. The minimal it's about 37, 35, and especially when it's cooled down, the ambient temperature is down. It tends to be cooler. It's because I live in an environment where it's pretty humid inside, so it's even weather conditions, so it's actually doing a great job. I can't imagine how low it's going to be probably on the winter time. So right now it's just like in the mornings, it tends to be like around 34 degrees minimal. And I mean, even when it was 62, 63 degrees, it was the minimum amount of temperature. It was running around like 40, between 45, many times to 50 degrees Celsius, maximum about sometimes to 82 degrees or 74, 75 degrees Celsius when not being loaded and stuff. While now it's it's free of refreshing, seeing sometimes the CPU going below 40 degrees, and then of course many times it stays about between 41 to 45 degrees, sometimes maximum about 50 to 64 degrees Celsius, which is definitely a difference. And as you guys can see, just like now for after showing you guys this and refreshing this, Maximo just went to about 65 degrees as I was stating here. So it's been around, it's normally the maximum stays there, but normally you can, it tends to go fast to a high temperature and then goes down and stays like idle state, like basically in a state that. So as you guys can see in the minimal, in the value, which current going on, the minimal value, how it is. And value itself, it's it's going on with, so of course 48 on peak core max, but other than that it's about 51, things like that. So it's not doing that bad, especially because it is a little bit humid inside, but it's actually doing a really good job here. And as you see, the watts is definitely less than what I was using before, so it does saves me a low electric bill. If you guys wondering, definitely edit this in the BIOS, especially if you guys cannot, if you guys have Asus motherboards and you guys cannot enable the settings to, to restore tuning after reboot. I can, fortunately, because it seems to be a bug, even after updating BIOS and everything. So in my case, I decided to just edit BIOS, which is easier, better, and efficient, because that stays there permanently, and you don't have to worry about going to this, restarting it. And then of course you do have the option in this case to save it. I do have a profile there. You just go show value and then apply, and that will edit there. If you guys have the option to enable that, then when your computer has to reboot, this will normally start and it will just go back to the tuning and stay there. But many of us find that going to the BIOS would just be better, and and in there. So just use the extreme tuning utility just as a reference to see what works for you, and then just add the final numbers into the BIOS. Just make sure you pay attention to each of them, exactly how it is that works well for you, then it does. So yeah. And again, it does save a lot of, for me, save a lot of electricity, going from 324 at least maximum, at least 260 in normally when it's not on the low to to this amount of temperature. So it definitely does a great job. As you guys can see, still under 100 watts here, at least for this. And temperature wise to being around in the 65 degrees. So yeah. Anyways, this is the magic or the great work for undervolting your CPU. It does do a great job. I'm sure for those with a K, at least to get at least to the same kind of similar frequencies, you need to probably higher, your voltage, and even undervolting will just be a little similar. That's what makes the KS a little bit special, because the KS is the same as the K. It's just a bind the CPU with better performance, meaning it's like a silicon lottery that you win with a K, but it just becomes a KS just because that is how Intel normally says it. They set those CPUs aside and then they test it, and of course they resell it for a little bit slightly higher price. So but the good thing is that you can undervolt the CPU and then still overclock it to almost about the desired amount. In my case, like you see, I'm able to still get 6,000 megahertz. Of course, with the term of velocity boost, it does reduce when the temperature goes to higher, but that is actually not bad at all. I don't see much drop in performance, and it still does a great job in pretty much anything, So it's pretty satisfying anyways. It still does a great job. It does reach my goal in keeping this below 100 degrees. Again, even I can still get to 115 degrees and still not experience that big issue like I did before, because I didn't have many problems, but I did has, again, I was tired of that much voltage in that case, and I knew that exactly that I could undervolt. So that was a risk that either K the KS and just continue, because we all know when you go into the KS and the K, you're expecting to have spend higher, more voltage, watts in electricity and that stuff. It is a power hungry CPU, but you do have the ability, if everything goes undervolt perfectly, just like it did, you can still save a good considerable amount of money in your electric bill, and at the same time be able to overclock it, at least that. The stock settings normally with Turbo Boost, I believe 1 or 2 cores will get you about 6,000 megahertz, but in my case, again, with even undervolting, I was at least able to get pretty much all the P cores to 6,000, or at least preset in that case. So even though it's set to 5 cores to 6,000, the 259 and a core 8, again, it can still run about 6,000 megahertz when it's under the temperature that you set pretty much in the in the TV view temp 1 and temp 2 in this case. If it does, then of course you guys may see in the last data that it may just reduce to about, the lowest I went to about 5399 to 5400 megahertz. Again, it's not a big deal. I don't see much difference there. So it's still, when it comes to gaming, I do a lot of times see it better going to 56, because right now I'm not expecting to drop that much when gaming, only as a bit slightly. So many times when I do benchmarks, when I set up, I do see that it's pretty much going about 56 to sometimes 5900 megahertz when gaming and all that. So again, we see the temperature here and all that because obviously one thing that affects is ambient temperature, and at the same time all the factors, and and temperature of course goes here higher when you're doing bench testing and stress testing, because that puts more work into the CPU than, of course, with gaming you expect to get less. Alright everyone, so I hope that this video helps understanding how to basically undervolt and overclock your CPU. This is part 2 of the video of how to actually do it directly from the BIOS instead of using the Intel Extreme tuning utility. If you like this video, please do give a like and subscribe below. I do really appreciate anyone that can subscribe and definitely give a like. This helps me out a lot, especially because I am actually growing here. I only have to upload a few videos, and so I want to be able to definitely set up more videos soon as well. I do plan to set up one with the new Samsung Odyssey G7 for the 57-inch monitor. And so if you guys do give, if I do have specific good amount of subscribers and likes, I definitely will be able to go ahead and set that video with some more reviews of that. So please definitely support me in this case if you guys do like the information I provided, and we definitely do so. So thank you all for your time, and you all have a great night or day.